Well, we want to thank you for allowing us to share this time with you. Amie and I came for the first time last year, and we're so inspired by what you're doing every day that we went back really charged up, and we really appreciate it. And it was really fun to have some of the teachers put us as part of the grant and then get to interact with the students. We think it's really important to be able to understand, because we get the fruits of your labor. We get to understand what you've poured into those students and their passion, and we get to share then that other side. So it's great that we can be here and bridge the gap to understand what their foundation is, and then hopefully continue that passion that you've instilled in them.
We've got 6 projects that we're going to talk about that we're really excited about that we do in our classroom in various classes that we've tried these out and have worked really well, around the themes of manufacturing to go with the theme of this conference, and then also some ethics examples. So we're going to go through these 6 examples with you. But what we'd like you to do is, as we're going through these, and you think of, wow, I could apply it in a slightly different way, or wow, that gives me a really good idea. I bet I could take this and do something else. Or maybe you just have an idea that you think would be really great to share. If everyone in this room did 1 or 2 ideas, we might have, 80 ideas that will come out of, that will branch out of 6, which I think would be amazing. What we're going to do is we'll type those up and we'll sort of organize them in a way that makes sense, and we'll provide those on the Google Drive. So we will get all those ideas back to you. So hopefully we'll have lots of fruit from this half an hour together. So we're dividing it up between manufacturing and ethics. So the first section is going to be on manufacturing. So the first example that we wanted to share with you, was what we like to call save the business. And in this example, we've used this as an individual example. And what we do is we have a scenario that we give to students, and we basically explain that a banker has hired them to help this company. They need to go in and and analyze this information that is given to them and make some recommendations. So what we do is we write up a little background on the case, and we end up giving them a list of accounts that are kind of in a random order. And just give them that information, and they'll take that information back and individually work on this project. And we purposely will set this up so that whatever we've sort of covered in the class, we would like them to apply that in this case. Okay, so the first thing that they should do, that they should know how to do, is take that information and put it into some financial statements. Manufacturing, so it's the cost of goods manufactured, cost of goods sold, end up with income statement to see what is going on. Then they'll see that this company really is in trouble. Like for example, we're working on break even or looking at variable versus fixed costs, things like that. These are the things that we've done in that semester. So we would like them to apply some of those things that they've learned. Here's the key though. They can come back and ask us for 3 pieces of information. So we limit it to just 3. So they have to go back and think about what do they really need to be able to apply some of the tools that they've learned in the class. And you could apply this, I think, to financial as well. And we just used a case in the book. It was a problem that was a comprehensive problem that was in the textbook. And so we just used that and embellished that a little bit. So you can leave out an important piece of information. Or, the thing, like for example, another couple of examples where we worked a lot with how does last year compare to this year? So one of the questions we were hoping that they would ask is, do you have prior year information? And if they did ask that question, they would get that information. And budget, do you have a budget? So things like that we were doing in the class, we were hoping that they would ask those questions. You can also actually give different students different answers. So if you want to have a little variety and not have things copied, you can actually purposely give different answers to different students. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be a nightmare, but it really wasn't, because I just had a spreadsheet and I sort of kept track of what questions they asked and what answers I gave them, and it really wasn't that difficult. At the end, they gave like a 10-minute presentation.
One of the things you talked about earlier today was having, some of the presentation and more of the communication skills. And what this one really did then was it made the students formulate really good questions, because in some cases they formulated their question in such a way that they got very limited information versus someone who formulated a really well-structured question and they got a wealth of information. So it did that, and then the presentation piece obviously is putting them in that role of, can I present what I found?
Okay, the next one that we like to use is called FIFO, LIFO, and Legos. And so what we do is we set up basically a manufacturing environment, and we assign we have groups of students of maybe 4 or 5 that are in these manufacturing units. And preceding this would be a great time to maybe show, maybe you had a plant tour, or maybe you have a video of kind of what goes on in the manufacturing setting to sort of introduce them to that. And then you sort of assign students as a cost accountant, an inventory tracker, an inspector, plant manager. So give them certain roles. And then what we had up at the front were Legos that were in different colors, because trying to get students to understand the inventory flow, it can be very, very difficult. You would think it wouldn't be, but the LIFO, FIFO, people flipping that, we have a lot of that. So what we did was we had each of the purchases were designated in different colors. And so then the students would come up periodically to get their purchases that were all, they were very distinctive. And then they would go back and they would have to calculate FIFO or LIFO using the units and using the fact they could do it very easily because they had the different colors. I really didn't even explain much about LIFO or FIFO before I even started this exercise, because they were able to sort of work it through just generally, what those concepts mean. After we went through that, they calculated their gross profit. I had them report things out. And they answered some questions on a worksheet about LIFO, FIFO, average costing based on that, the tangible activity. Then the last thing we did was they had purchases of 29 Legos, and that they could see the different colors. The very last activity, we had them take 29 Legos of the same color and say, okay, now go ahead and do the LIFO, FIFO, and average cost. Then they realized at that point that you couldn't tell the Legos apart, and so how were they going to do that? And it was a great way to for them to understand what's the difference between an accounting assumption and something that actually happens. And it's you could tell that everyone sort of just really caught on to the fact that, hey, this is actually assumption that we're doing, and we really can't do this in actual practice. So having those props, I think, really helped. The other managerial accounting application was using kind of art, I guess, to have students creatively draw pictures for things that seemed impossible to draw. And I usually start this one by actually drawing something on the board myself, and I'm terrible at drawing, so then they are quite at ease because they know, oh gosh, I can't do any worse than that. So that's always really helpful. But giving them tons of resources, colored pencils, markers, crayons, just stuff that they could sort of explore. We would give them the terms. First, we would have them pick a company, choose a company that was familiar to them, and then as a group, as a class, we would choose that company. And then they would have to draw out some pretty difficult words and try to figure out how do you put those into visuals. So things like cost of goods manufactured and cost of goods sold, they had to take the product and figure out how to draw something that would actually represent that. We've also done this in financial accounting with things like receivables and payables. And you would be surprised, some of those are very difficult to actually put into a drawing. But after they did, we would scan some of them and reuse those when we were trying to explain some difficult concepts. And so they had something tangible to look back on. And it really helped some of that stuff stick. Okay?
I think what also happens with that one is that that whole idea of presentation again, when they're doing these kind of visuals, they're able to then take those big accounting words and put them into a context that everybody understands. So if they can do that, they've obviously synthesized and learned the material, but they're also learning the presentation skill of how do I take this and apply it to an audience that is not accountants. So it's a great way to help them understand telling a story. And I've actually told them about somebody that I work with who's a professional in the field, is a senior partner at a major firm, and he had a fraud investigation dealing with the cattle stockyard. And the clients couldn't understand what he was talking about. So guess what he did? He went out and got a little plastic money thing and a little plastic cow, and they made the cow and the money go around as he explained the scenario, because the visuals then helped the client understand what they couldn't understand verbally. So I think that's a great skill to pass along to the students. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some ethic issues. Obviously, accountants, we know, have to be ethical, and we have a code of professional ethics as part of our profession. Again, it's a great, $100 word, but do students really know what ethics means, and how do you put that into context where they can apply it? So the first idea that we put in here is taking somebody's code of ethics policy, or the AICPA code, and even with graduate students, we often talk about, you can put it in simple terms of doing the right thing for the right reasons. Is the right thing going to be the same to me or to Amie or to the next person? So putting the examples behind it. So using those as a tool to then say, okay, come back again. Can you see that we do a lot of presentation stuff? Because we do want them to have those skills of being able to communicate it back out. Do a presentation if you were applying it to the employees, to help them have some examples of what is doing the right thing. What is it mean to be ethical? What does it mean to make this decision? So that's the suggestion on that one. This one, there's part of this video at the end that was probably going to go over the heads of high schoolers, so I'll give you that caveat up front. But the first part of it is really, really engaging and will help students think about things differently. There's one part of the clip, the YouTube, where it talks about Johnny comes home from school and he's in trouble because he stole a pencil from his neighbor. And Dad gets all upset with him and explains how that is wrong and that's lying and it's not fair. And besides, Johnny, you could have come to me and I would have brought you a pencil from the office. And so the whole idea of what we communicate and how it gets distant. And in this day of credit cards, or now the mobile apps that we can pay for things, when we have that disconnect, we sometimes put a wall up that we don't even understand what the line we're potentially crossing into an ethical boundary. So it's a great video that talks about that, and then I've given you some suggestions based on what we've done in the past with it about how to discuss it. The other thing the video does is talk about a reset. There's a balance between having the opportunity to admit what you're doing, the kind of the open door policy, if I can reset and not be building up with the bulk of dishonest behaviors, because we all have some. We all do little things. That I don't cross the line into the what the heck effect. I'm just going to do it because it doesn't matter at this point. So it creates a good balance, and I think it's a really good key point for creating some discussion. Okay? And the whole idea behind this one is creating discussion. Does it make sense? This one is really fun. You can take an ethical dilemma from anywhere. We have a great professor at Edgewood who's written a number of books on ethical dilemmas within business. So I usually start with some of his, but you can get them from other books, you can get them from your own experiences, from professionals, or tailor them to students. Cheating ones are easy to do. One of the ones I did with a group of undergrads was talked about it as though it was an internship. They were on an internship with a group of professionals at the firm they were working at, going to a conference. And the supervisor, as part of the group going to the conference, said, let's blow off the conference, let's go shopping and go out drinking. And ultimately gets called on the carpet, but they want to know who knew and what was known and what do I do and was that ethical and so forth, and using that as an example to frame some of the questions. Then turn it back to them to say, okay, you now construct an ethical dilemma and a situation where you would have to put in to context, decide who is potentially involved in the stakeholders in the situation, and how am I going to approach it? How am I going to evaluate it? And the whole idea with these dilemmas and the codes and talking about dishonesty is to understand, and it's hard for high school students because they're not brain development-wise necessarily at a point where they think beyond black and white, but to help them understand that real world is shades of gray and that it's not easily definable. And if you don't have that compass and defined within yourself, you're walking into a minefield where you're going to be faced with potentially questions that you're not prepared to answer. Okay?
Yeah, I was thinking, one thing that we like to do with the students is that we'll look at an issue that has two sides to it, and we'll put them into groups and assign them to one side or the other. And so it sort of forces them to think about what it would be like to have to argue that side, even though they maybe don't feel strongly about that particular side. And then do an analysis afterward, do some reflection on that. How did it feel to be arguing about that particular side? And how effective were you in that process? So sometimes we do that with, I'm thinking like executive compensation issues. Those are pretty popular. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, we've looked at the biggest CEO salaries versus the lowest paid employee and what's the differential. You know, is it 300 times, 500 times? What's the fair differential? What should people be paid? Does the CEO deserve more than the person who's there, you know, cleaning up during the night when everybody's gone? So Amie's right, there's a lot of great examples out there. It's your creativity is kind of the bounds of what you can do for this one. The whole idea with all of these too is, which we're hearing from all of you, so we're not, you know, teaching you anything that's new, just hopefully expanding and creating more, because when we go to things and we hear ideas from different perspectives, it's like, oh yeah, and we could do this, and then we could do that. And that's hopefully the goal here, and what you're going to have on the card is to be able to spark some of your own specifics and specific ways to implement it. Because the idea of active learning and engaged learning, I think from listening to all of you, you already get. It's not the classroom kind of, you know, I follow a textbook. It's flipping that whole idea of, yeah, you can read it, we'll help you learn the debits and credits, as someone said this morning, but we're going to help you understand the bigger, broader picture and the context in which this applies, and that you're going to go implement it.
So what we're kind of hoping is maybe we have just a couple of minutes. If you guys could talk among your table to see, were there some new ideas? Do you think that you could apply these in a different way? We'll give you a couple of minutes to talk about that in your groups, in your tables, and then we'll come back together and close.
There were some great ideas that were being thrown out, and I hope that it sparked some different things. There were talk about how pictures can be used for other things, so it sounds like some of you are doing that and have some great ideas around that. That's great, because again, we teach at a different level, so we want to bridge that, and your ideas for the students you know are real applicable. Dana shared a great one about ethics. She used Lockheed Martin, right, is what you said?
Yeah, Lockheed Martin has their entire code of ethics on their website, and they actually have made little video clips of different ethical dilemmas that have happened in the workplace. So what happens is they show these little video clips, and then they say, okay, well, what would you do? And they have different answers that the students can pick, and then we debate which one you should be picked, and we pick one that says, well, that might be okay, but you could have done this with this, maybe this would work. And they kind of show, I think they have like 75 different ethical dilemmas. That is really cool. And they're also there's a site.
We really appreciate the interaction and are open to questions. And if we can ever be a resource, both Amie and I are CPAs, so if there's things that we can do. Mentioned in the opening, I've now gone back to an assurance job. So I'm at one of those public firms. We love students, we love interacting. So, you know, I went out to a class yesterday and actually spoke at a class. So if you want, you know, guest speakers from Edgewood or my firm, or you want tours or those kind of things, we're always open to that, bouncing ideas off. I think one of the greatest benefits of this is the network and that you're able to talk to each other. So we'd love to help with that however we can. I left some of my cards up here for my new job. If anybody wants that contact information, help yourself. Thank you.